Zixara pressed her hand against the medical bay window and watched the stars drift by. Each breath hurt. The oxygen-rich air of the space station burned through her lungs like acid. Small crystal patches had begun forming on her purple skin, spreading slowly across her arms like a deadly infection. She had been traveling for 3 months now, moving from one medical station to another. Everyone told her the same thing. Her condition was getting worse, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. The Vailnathi were an old race. They had built cities among the stars when most other species were still learning to make fire. Their technology could reshape planets and bend space itself. But they could not save her. Zixara's people came from a world covered in methane clouds. Their bodies were made to breathe that thick yellow gas. When the Vailnathi joined the greater galactic community, they created special breathing masks and air filters. Most of her people could live and work anywhere in the galaxy. But not Zixara. She had atmospheric rejection syndrome. Her body attacked any artificial breathing device. The filters made her sick. The masks burned her skin. Even the most advanced technology her people had created would kill her faster than the oxygen she was trying to avoid. So she breathed the station's air directly, and it was slowly killing her. Dr. Velnash, the chief medical officer on Harmony Point, had examined her that morning. The tall, thin alien had 3 eyes and skin like polished metal. His species, the Keth Mori, were known throughout the galaxy for their medical knowledge. "The crystallization has spread to your liver," he had told her in his clicking voice. "Your cellular structure is breaking down. The oxygen is changing your body's chemistry at the molecular level." Zixara had asked the question she always asked. "How long do I have?" Dr. Velnash had looked at her with what might have been sadness. "Perhaps 5 days. Maybe less." 5 days. She had traveled across half the galaxy, spoken to the greatest doctors from dozens of species, and the answer was always the same. There was no cure. There was no treatment. There was only waiting to die. The medical bay door hissed open behind her. Zixara turned to see a small figure enter. It was one of the humans. She had seen a few of them on the station, but had never spoken to one directly. Humans were still new to galactic society. Most species thought of them as primitive and emotional. They had only joined the galactic community 50 years ago. Their technology was simple compared to the great civilizations. Their ships were slow and clunky. Their medicine was basic. This human was a female with dark hair pulled back from her face. She wore the white coat of a medical researcher. Her brown eyes looked concerned but determined. "Excuse me," the human said in accented galactic standard. "Are you Zixara? I am Dr. Sarah Chen. I work in the xenobiology lab here." Zixara nodded, speaking hurt now, so she tried to keep her words short. "Yes. I have been following your case," Dr. Chen said. "I know this might sound strange, but would you allow me to examine you? I might have some ideas." Zixara almost laughed, but it would have hurt too much. A human wanted to help her when the greatest medical minds in the galaxy had given up? "Why?" she asked. Dr. Chen moved closer. She was very small compared to most galactic species. Zixara was nearly 7 feet tall, and Dr. Chen barely reached her shoulder. "Because sometimes looking at a problem differently can help," the human said. "My people have only recently learned about galactic medicine. We might see things that others miss." Zixara studied the human's face. There was something different about her expression. The other doctors had looked at Zixara with pity. This human looked at her with curiosity. "What could you possibly do that the others have not tried?" Zixara asked. Dr. Chen smiled. It was a strange expression that humans use to show friendliness. "I do not know yet, but I would like to try." "What do you have to lose?" That was true. Zixara had nothing left to lose. In 5 days, maybe less, the crystallization would reach her heart. The oxygen that kept this station alive would finally kill her completely. Very well, she said. Dr. Chen led her to a smaller examination room. The equipment here looked different from what Zixara had seen before. It was simpler, cruder than the smooth, perfect devices the other species used. My people come from a difficult world, Dr. Chen explained as she set up her instruments. We had to adapt to many different environments just to survive. Maybe that experience can help us understand your problem better. She asked Zixara to breathe into a collection device. The air sample would show exactly how the oxygen was affecting her body chemistry. Then she took samples of Zixara's blood and skin, including some of the crystal formations. This crystallization, Dr. Chen said, studying the samples under a microscope. It is your body's way of trying to protect itself from the oxygen, like building armor. Zixara had heard this before. Yes, but the armor is killing me. What if it is not armor? Dr. Chen said quietly. What if it is something else? She worked in silence for a long time. Zixara watched her move between different machines, taking readings and making notes. The humans seemed to approach the problem differently than the other doctors had. They had focused on stopping the crystallization or filtering the air better. Dr. Chen seemed more interested in understanding why the crystallization happened. After 2 hours, Dr. Chen sat down across from Zixara. Her expression was thoughtful. I need to study this more, she said, but I think I might understand what is happening. Your body is not just being poisoned by oxygen. It is trying to change itself to survive. Change how? I am not sure yet. But I have seen similar reactions in organisms on my home world. When the environment changes, life finds a way to adapt. Your body might be trying to adapt too. Zixara felt a small spark of something she had not felt in months. Hope. Can you help me? She asked. Dr. Chen was quiet for a moment. I do not know, but I would like to try. There might be a way to work with your body's changes instead of fighting against them. As Zixara left the examination room, she felt different. Not better. The crystal patches still burned and breathing still hurt. But for the first time since her diagnosis, someone had looked at her condition and not immediately given up. Maybe the primitive humans could see something that the advanced galactic civilizations had missed. Maybe their simple approach could succeed where perfect technology had failed. She had 5 days to find out. The emergency meeting took place in the Grand Council chamber of Harmony Point. Zixara sat in the center of a huge circular room, surrounded by representatives from the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. She wore a special environmental suit that slowed down the oxygen poisoning, but it could only buy her a little more time. High Counselor Neth Ara of the Vailanathi spoke first. She was ancient even by her people's standards, her purple skin marked with the wisdom lines that showed centuries of experience. Honorable beings, she began, her voice carrying across the chamber through translation devices. We face a crisis that challenges our understanding of galactic medicine. If our combined knowledge cannot save one life, what does this say about our progress as civilized species? Around the room, alien heads nodded in agreement. The crystalline architects gleamed like living diamonds. The quantum healers of Nexus Prime shimmered with internal light. The biosymbiotic collective moved as one flowing mass of interconnected beings. Each species had sent their greatest medical minds. These were beings who had conquered diseases that destroyed entire worlds. They had created technologies that could rebuild bodies at the atomic level. They had mastered life itself, but none of them had been able to save Zixara. The first to try had been the crystalline architects. Master Builder Sixtal rose from his seat, his diamond-like body reflecting the room's lights. We propose to create a perfect atmospheric bubble around the patient, he announced. Our molecular engineering can build a barrier that is completely impermeable to oxygen while allowing other necessary gases to pass through. He activated a holographic display showing complex diagrams. The barrier would surround Zixara like an invisible shell, keeping the deadly oxygen away from her body while maintaining the pressure and other atmospheric elements she needed. The energy requirements would be significant, Sixtel continued. But we could power the barrier using quantum generators. The patient would be completely protected. Dr. Velnash, who had been studying the calculations, raised one of his 3 hands. How long would this protection last? Sixtal's crystalline form dimmed slightly. According to our projections, perhaps 3 weeks. The energy costs would become too great after that. 3 weeks. It was better than 5 days, but it was still a death sentence. The room fell quiet as the first solution was rejected. Next came the quantum healers. Their representative, a being called Fluxara, existed in several dimensions at once. Looking at her made Zixara's eyes water. "We can restructure her genetic code," Fluxara announced, her voice seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere. "By reaching into the quantum level of her DNA, we can remove the genes that cause atmospheric rejection syndrome." The holographic display changed to show the complex structure of Vail-Nathi DNA. Quantum tools would reach into each cell and rewrite the genetic instructions that made oxygen poisonous to Zixara. "This would cure her completely," Fluxara continued. "She would be able to breathe any atmosphere in the galaxy." High Counselor Nethara leaned forward. "What are the risks?" "The genetic changes would be extensive," Fluxara admitted. "We would need to rewrite approximately 30% of her genetic code. She would no longer be entirely Vail-Nathi. She would become something new." The silence this time was longer and heavier. To save Zixara's life, they would have to destroy who she was. Her family, her culture, her very identity as a Vail-Nathi would be erased. "I would rather die as myself than live as someone else," Zixara said quietly. The second solution was rejected. The biosymbiotic collective tried next. Their representative was harder to look at than the quantum healer. It appeared to be made of thousands of small creatures working together as one mind. "We offer integration," the collective spoke with 1,000 voices. "Her consciousness can join with our network. Her individual thoughts would become part of our greater intelligence. Her body would be supported by our biological systems." The idea was that Zixara's mind would become part of the collective's shared consciousness. Her failing body would be sustained by their biological network. She would continue to exist, but not as an individual. "She would be immortal," the collective continued. "Death would have no meaning. Pain would be shared among millions and become nothing." But Zixara shook her head. "I want to live as myself, not as part of something else. Thank you, but no." The third solution failed. One by one, each species presented their ideas. The temporal engineers offered to put her in a time loop where her condition would never progress. The nano-healers wanted to fill her body with microscopic robots that would fight the oxygen molecule by molecule. The energy beings suggested transferring her consciousness into a pure energy form. Each solution was brilliant. Each solution came from species that had mastered forces beyond imagination. Each solution would technically save her life, and each solution required her to stop being Zixara. As the meeting continued, frustration grew in the chamber. These beings had solved problems that seemed impossible. They had made stars burn longer and planets change their orbits. They had created artificial life and bent the laws of physics, but they could not solve the simple problem of letting one person breathe safely. "Perhaps," said Dr. Velnash carefully, "we should accept that some problems have no solutions. Medical science has limits." High Counselor Nethara's skin darkened with anger. "Unacceptable. If our civilization cannot save one life, then we have failed as civilized beings." In the back of the chamber, Dr. Sarah Chen had been listening quietly. She had been invited to observe because she was the station's xenobiology expert, even though humans were not considered a major galactic power. Now she raised her hand. "Excuse me," she said in her accented galactic standard. The chamber fell silent. All eyes turned to the small human. Some of the alien representatives looked annoyed that their important meeting was being interrupted by a primitive species. High Counselor Nethara, however, gestured for her to speak. "Dr. Chen, yes? You have something to contribute?" Sarah stood up slowly. She looked very small in the huge chamber, surrounded by beings from the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. "I have been listening to all these solutions," she said, "and I think maybe we are looking at the problem wrong." Master Builder Sixtal's crystalline form flashed with irritation. "Explain." "Everyone is trying to change Zixara or put her in some kind of artificial environment," Sarah continued. "You want to modify her genes or her consciousness, or put her in a bubble, or freeze her in time. But what if we change the environment instead?" The chamber erupted in voices. Multiple species began speaking at once in their various languages. The translation devices struggled to keep up. "Impossible!" called out one of the nano-healers. "You cannot change the atmospheric composition of every ship, station, and planet in the galaxy." "The logistics alone would be unthinkable," added a temporal engineer. Sarah waited for the noise to die down. Then she smiled that strange human expression. "I am not talking about changing everything," she said. "I am talking about teaching the air itself to change." The chamber fell completely silent. Every being in the room was staring at the small human as if she had just suggested something insane, which, from their perspective, she probably had. Dr. Sarah Chen walked to the center of the chamber. Every eye, sensor, and consciousness in the room focused on her. She could feel the weight of their attention, but she did not seem afraid. "May I show you something?" she asked. High Counselor Nethara nodded. "Proceed." Sarah activated her portable research device. A holographic display appeared, but it was different from the perfect, clean projections the other species had used. This one showed what looked like a messy, chaotic swirl of tiny organisms. "These are extremophiles from my homeworld," Sarah explained. "They are very small life forms that can survive in places where nothing else can live. Some live in boiling water, some live in acid, some live in the vacuum of space." The alien representatives leaned forward to study the display. The organisms looked primitive compared to their advanced technologies. They were just tiny specks of life, barely more complex than viruses. "What does this have to do with atmospheric adaptation?" asked Fluxara, the quantum healer. Her multidimensional form seemed confused. Sarah changed the holographic display to show a different organism. This one looked like a tiny blob with hair-like projections. "This is a tardigrade," she said. "It can survive in space, in extreme heat, in extreme cold, and without water for decades. It can adapt to almost any environment by changing its own chemistry." She paused and looked around the chamber. "What if we could create organisms like this but designed specifically to help with breathing?" Master Builder Sixtal's crystalline form flashed with confusion. "You want to use primitive life forms to solve this problem?" "Not primitive," Sarah corrected. "Adaptive. There is a difference." She changed the display again. This time it showed a complex diagram of tiny organisms surrounding a larger figure that looked like Zixara. "I want to create microscopic organisms that can survive in both methane and oxygen," Sarah explained. "They would live around Zixara and constantly adjust the air composition near her body. Instead of a mechanical filter, she would have a living ecosystem that travels with her." The chamber was completely silent. Sarah could hear the hum of the station's life support systems in the background. Then the biosymbiotic collective began to speak with their 1,000 voices. "You propose to release uncontrolled organisms into our environments? This is madness! What if these organisms mutate? Demanded one of the nano-healers. What if they spread beyond their intended purpose? What if they evolve beyond our control? Added a temporal engineer. Sarah had expected these reactions. She looked around the chamber calmly. Life always involves risk, she said. Every advanced species in this room began as uncontrolled organisms that evolved and adapted. You are all here because life found ways to survive and change. Dr. Vel Nash raised one of his 3 hands. But we control our technology. We design it to be perfect and predictable. What you propose is biological chaos. No, Sarah said firmly. What I propose is biological cooperation. She walked over to where Zixara sat in her environmental suit. The alien woman looked weak, but her eyes were bright with interest. Your body is already trying to adapt, Sarah told her. Those crystal formations are not just armor, they are your cells attempting to create a barrier between your biology and the oxygen. Your body knows what it needs to do. It just needs help. Sarah turned back to the assembled representatives. My plan is to introduce specially designed organisms into Zixara's respiratory system. They would form a symbiotic relationship with her body. Instead of fighting the oxygen, they would process it and convert it into gases she can safely breathe. The holographic display showed a cross-section of lungs filled with tiny, glowing organisms. They moved like a living cloud, constantly shifting and adapting. The organisms would create a gradient zone around her, Sarah continued. Right next to her skin, the air would be mostly methane. A few inches away, it would be mixed gases. A few feet away, it would be normal oxygen that everyone else can breathe. High Counselor Nethara studied the display carefully. How would you control these organisms? How would you prevent them from spreading to others? Sarah smiled. We would not control them in the way you understand control. We would partner with them. The organisms would be designed to only survive in symbiosis with Veil Nathi biology. They would need Zixara's body chemistry to live. Without her, they would die within hours. Master Builder Sixtal's crystalline form turned a deeper shade of blue, which Sarah had learned meant confusion or distress among his people. This violates every principle of technological safety, he said. We create tools that obey our commands precisely. We do not create life that makes its own decisions. But that is exactly why your tools cannot solve this problem, Sarah replied. You are trying to force the universe to work the way you want it to, but the universe is not a machine. It is alive, and life adapts. Fluxara's multi-dimensional form shimmered with what might have been anger. We have mastered the quantum forces that control reality itself. We can rewrite the laws of physics. Why should we trust primitive biological processes when we have perfect control? Sarah walked back to the center of the chamber. She looked small and fragile compared to the advanced beings around her, but her voice was steady. Because your perfect control is not working, she said simply. You have tried to solve this problem with the most advanced technologies in the galaxy. Every solution requires changing who Zixara is or putting her in a prison of artificial systems. She gestured toward Zixara. My solution would let her remain herself. She could travel freely throughout the galaxy. She could live a normal life. The organisms would adapt to any environment she encounters. And if something goes wrong? Asked Dr. Vel Nash. If the organisms mutate or evolve in unexpected ways? Then we adapt too, Sarah said. That is what life does. It finds solutions to problems that perfect technology cannot solve. The chamber erupted in debates. Different species argued in their various languages about the risks and possibilities of Sarah's proposal. Some called it brilliant, others called it insane. Through it all, Zixara sat quietly in her environmental suit. The crystal formations on her skin had spread further since the morning. Time was running out. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was weak but clear. I want to try it. The chamber fell silent again. High Counselor Nethara looked concerned. Zixara, this procedure has never been attempted. The risks are unknown. It could kill you immediately. Zixara looked around the chamber at all the representatives from the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Then she looked at the small human who had proposed something that none of them had ever imagined. "I am dying anyway," she said. "Your perfect technologies cannot save me, but maybe this imperfect solution can." She paused to catch her breath. Speaking was becoming harder. "Dr. Chen is right. You are all trying to change me or control my environment with artificial systems. But what if the answer is not control? What if the answer is cooperation?" The chamber was quiet, except for the sound of Zixara's labored breathing. "I choose to trust life over technology," she said. "I choose adaptation over control." High Counselor Nethara looked around the chamber at the other representatives. Many of them appeared disturbed by the idea of using uncontrolled biological processes instead of perfect technology. But none of them had a better solution. "Very well," the High Counselor said finally. "Dr. Chen, you have permission to attempt this procedure, but it will be done under careful observation, with representatives from every major medical organization monitoring." Sarah nodded. "I understand, but I should warn you, what we are about to do has never been attempted before. We will be creating something entirely new." She looked directly at Zixara. "We will be teaching air itself to live." The bio-laboratory that Dr. Sarah Chen had requested looked nothing like the sterile, perfect medical facilities the galactic civilizations usually built. Instead of smooth walls and gleaming instruments, the room was filled with growing tanks, atmospheric processors, and monitoring equipment that seemed almost alive. Zixara lay on a specially designed table in the center of the room. Her environmental suit had been removed, and she breathed the station's oxygen-rich air directly. Each breath caused visible pain, and the crystal formations on her skin glowed with an unhealthy light. "How much time does she have left?" Dr. Chen asked Dr. Velnash. The three-eyed alien checked his readings. "Perhaps 6 hours before the crystallization reaches her heart. Maybe less." Around the room, representatives from every major galactic civilization watched through protective barriers. They had insisted on safety protocols that Sarah thought were unnecessary, but she had agreed to their demands. Master Builder Sixtal monitored energy readings. Fluxara watched quantum fluctuations. The Biosymbiotic Collective observed biological patterns. Each species used their most advanced sensors to track what was about to happen. Sarah worked at a growing tank that bubbled with strange, luminous liquid. Inside the tank, billions of microscopic organisms swirled in complex patterns. They looked like tiny stars, each one glowing with its own light. "These organisms have been modified using techniques my people developed on Earth," Sarah explained to the observers. "They combine the hardiness of tardigrades with the atmospheric processing abilities of certain bacteria and archaea." She pointed to different sections of the tank. "Some process oxygen and convert it to methane. Others work in reverse. Some can survive in pure vacuum. Others thrive in high-pressure gas giant atmospheres." Dr. Velnash studied the readings from his instruments. "How do they know which gas to produce?" "They communicate with each other through chemical signals," Sarah replied. "They are like a living computer that constantly calculates the right atmospheric mixture for their environment." High Counselor Nethara's image appeared on a communication screen. She was watching from the safety of the council chamber. "Dr. Chen," she said, "are you certain these organisms cannot spread to other beings?" Sarah nodded. "They are designed to only survive in symbiosis with Vailnathi biology, specifically Zixara's biology. Her unique genetic structure is what they need to live. They are not parasites. They are partners." She moved to another tank that contained a different type of organism. These looked more like tiny jellyfish, translucent and graceful. These are the interface organisms, she explained. They will form the connection between Zixara's immune system and the atmospheric processors. They speak both chemical languages, her biology and the organism's communication system. Zixara turned her head weakly toward Sarah. How will they get into my body? You will breathe them in, Sarah said gently. Just like breathing normal air. Once they are in your lungs, they will begin establishing communication with your immune system. The idea clearly terrified the galactic observers. The thought of breathing living organisms was disturbing to species that relied on perfect technological control. But Zixara nodded. I am ready. Sarah combined samples from both tanks into a breathing apparatus that looked more like a living flower than a medical device. The organism swirled inside it like a galaxy in miniature. The first few minutes will be difficult, Sarah warned. Your body will react to the foreign organisms, but if my calculations are correct, they will begin negotiating with your immune system almost immediately. She placed the breathing device over Zixara's mouth and nose. When you are ready, take a deep breath. Every sensor in the room focused on Zixara as she breathed in the living atmosphere. For a moment, nothing happened. Then her vital signs exploded. Alarm sounds filled the laboratory as Zixara's heart rate spiked dangerously. Her skin flushed from purple to dark blue. The crystal formations began growing rapidly, spreading across her body like wildfire. Her immune system is rejecting the organisms, Dr. Velnash shouted. We need to stop this procedure immediately. But Sarah was watching different readings. Her equipment showed the chemical communication between the organisms and Zixara's biology. No, she said firmly. This is negotiation, not rejection. They are talking to each other. On the screens, complex patterns of chemical signals flowed between Zixara's cells and the introduced organisms. It looked like two different languages trying to find common words. Zixara's body convulsed. Her breathing became rapid and shallow. The crystal formations continued spreading, but Sarah noticed something the others had missed. The crystals were changing color. Instead of the sickly yellow glow that meant tissue death, they were beginning to show patches of healthy blue-green. The organisms were not just being rejected, they were being integrated. Look at her cellular chemistry, Sarah called out to Dr. Velnash. The oxygen concentration in her bloodstream is dropping, but she is not suffocating. The three-eyed alien checked his readings with growing amazement. Impossible. Her blood oxygen should be critical, but her brain function is normal. Because the organisms are producing methane directly in her lungs, Sarah explained. They are giving her the gases she needs while processing the oxygen that would poison her. Slowly, Zixara's vital signs began to stabilize. Her heart rate dropped to normal levels. Her skin color returned to healthy purple. Most amazingly, the crystal formations stopped spreading. But something even more extraordinary was happening around her. A faint shimmer appeared in the air near Zixara's body. It was barely visible, like heat waves rising from warm pavement. The shimmer extended about 2 feet from her skin in all directions. What is that? Asked Master Builder Sixtail. Sarah smiled. That is the gradient zone. The organisms are not just working inside her body, they are creating a transition area in the air around her. She held up a small atmospheric sensor and moved it slowly from Zixara's skin outward. The readings changed dramatically as the device passed through different zones. Right next to her skin, the air is 70% methane, Sarah read. 1 foot away, it is 50% methane and 50 oxygen. 2 feet away, it is normal station atmosphere. The observers stared in amazement. The organisms had created a living atmospheric system that gradually changed from one gas mixture to another. There was no harsh boundary, no artificial barrier, just a smooth transition that allowed Zixara to breathe safely, while everyone around her could breathe normally too. "How is this possible?" whispered Fluxara. "The organisms exist throughout the gradient zone," Sarah explained. "They constantly adjust the gas mixture based on distance from Zixara's body and the needs of anyone else in the area." She moved her hand through the shimmer around Zixara. "If another being entered this zone, the organisms would detect their biology and adjust the atmospheric mixture to be safe for both species." Dr. Velnash was running every medical scan he could think of. "Her cellular damage is not just stopped," he reported with growing wonder. "It is reversing. The crystallization is actually healing." The crystal formations on Zixara's skin were indeed changing. The healthy blue-green color was spreading, pushing back the sickly yellow. Her body was not just surviving, it was recovering from months of oxygen damage. Zixara opened her eyes. For the first time in months, she took a deep breath without pain. "I can breathe," she whispered. Then stronger, "I can breathe." She sat up slowly, moving within the shimmering zone of living atmosphere that surrounded her. The organisms moved with her like a faithful companion, constantly adjusting and adapting to maintain the perfect atmospheric conditions. Around the laboratory, the representatives from the galaxy's most advanced civilizations watched in stunned silence. They had witnessed something that challenged everything they thought they knew about technology and control. A primitive human had succeeded where their perfect technologies had failed. She had not conquered the problem with force or control. She had solved it through cooperation and adaptation. Life had found a way. 3 weeks after the procedure, Zixara walked freely through the corridors of Harmony Point. The shimmering zone of living atmosphere moved with her like a personal cloud. Other beings on the station had grown used to the sight of her surrounded by the barely visible organisms that kept her alive. The crystal formations on her skin had almost completely healed. Where there had once been sickly yellow patches of dying tissue, now there was healthy purple skin marked with thin lines of blue-green that seemed to pulse gently with life. Dr. Sarah Chen walked beside her, carrying a portable monitor that tracked the atmospheric organisms. The device showed a complex pattern of communication between billions of tiny life forms. "How do you feel?" Sarah asked. Zixara smiled, an expression she had learned from watching humans. "Like myself again, but also like something more." They stopped at an observation window that looked out at the stars. Ships from dozens of species docked and departed from the station regularly. For the first time in her life, Zixara could board any of those ships without fear. "The organisms adapt to every new environment," she continued. "Yesterday, I visited the Kethmori section of the station, where the air is much thinner. The organisms adjusted automatically. I could breathe as easily there as I can here." Sarah checked her readings. The bioatmospheric system was performing better than she had ever hoped. The organisms not only maintained perfect atmospheric conditions for Zixara, but they were learning and improving their performance over time. "Dr. Chen," came a voice from behind them. They turned to see Dr. Velnash approaching with several other alien medical officers. "We have been studying the data from the past 3 weeks." The three-eyed alien's expression was one of professional amazement. The organisms are not just maintaining atmospheric balance. They are actively repairing damage throughout Zixara's body. Her cellular regeneration rate is now 20% faster than normal for her species. One of the other doctors, a tall being with crystalline skin like Master Builder Sixtail, stepped forward. "We have identified over 40 different types of organisms in the atmospheric system. Each one has a specific function, but they all work together perfectly." "It is like a living city," added a third doctor whose species Sarah did not recognize. "The organisms have created a complete ecosystem in the space around her body." Sarah nodded. This was what she had hoped for, but had not dared to expect. The bioatmospheric system had grown beyond her original design, becoming something more complex and effective than any technology. The most remarkable thing, Dr. Velnash continued, is that the system continues to evolve. The organisms are adapting to Zixara's specific needs and improving their cooperation with her biology. As if responding to their conversation, the shimmer around Zixara seemed to pulse gently. The organisms were not just alive, they were aware of their environment and the beings around them. High Counselor Nithara has requested a meeting, Dr. Velnash said. The Velanathi leadership wants to discuss expanding this treatment to others with atmospheric rejection syndrome. Sarah and Zixara exchanged glances. They had expected this request. The organisms are specifically designed for my biology, Zixara said carefully. They would need to be modified for each individual patient. Which brings us to our proposal, said a new voice. High Counselor Nethara entered the corridor, accompanied by representatives from several other species. Even Master Builder Sixtal was there, his crystalline form reflecting the corridor lights. Dr. Chen, the High Counselor began, the galactic medical community would like to establish a new research facility, a place where bioatmospheric solutions can be developed for various species and conditions. Sarah looked surprised. You want to expand biological solutions? Master Builder Sixtal stepped forward. His crystalline form had changed to a warmer, more accepting color. Your approach has challenged our understanding of medical technology, he admitted. We have always believed that perfect control was superior to adaptive cooperation, but your success cannot be denied. Fluxara, the quantum healer, shimmered into existence beside them. We have other conditions throughout the galaxy that our technologies cannot solve. Perhaps biological cooperation could succeed where our control has failed. The Biosymbiotic Collective's representative flowed into view. We offer our knowledge of biological integration to support this research. Sarah felt overwhelmed. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations were asking for her help to develop biological solutions instead of technological ones. Where would this research facility be located? She asked. Here, said High Counselor Nethara. Harmony Point already serves as a meeting place for multiple species. It would be perfect for developing atmospheric solutions that allow different beings to coexist. Over the following months, the Bioatmospheric Research Center took shape. The facility looked unlike any other scientific institution in the galaxy. Instead of sterile laboratories and perfect technological equipment, it featured growing chambers, living air processors, and atmospheric gardens where different gas mixtures swirled together in complex patterns. Scientists from dozens of species came to work with Sarah and Zixara. They brought problems that had seemed unsolvable. Beings who were allergic to artificial gravity, species that needed high radiation environments, creatures that required specific atmospheric pressures that would kill other life forms. For each challenge, they developed biological solutions, living gravity organizers that could create pockets of different gravitational fields, radiation processing organisms that could make deadly environments safe, pressure-adapting biosystems that could gradually adjust atmospheric conditions. The center's main laboratory had become a wonder to behold. The air itself seemed alive, shimmering with different colors and compositions as it adapted to accommodate researchers from species with wildly different environmental needs. Crystalline beings worked alongside methane breathers. High-pressure species collaborated with vacuum dwellers. Energy beings shared space with carbon-based life forms, all of them breathing the same air that somehow provided exactly what each species needed. Sarah stood in the center of this living laboratory, watching scientists who had once thought biological solutions were primitive and chaotic. Now they were learning to partner with life itself instead of trying to control it. Zixara approached, still surrounded by her personal atmospheric system that had saved her life and given birth to a new way of thinking about science. Do you ever think about what would have happened if I had accepted one of their technological solutions? She asked. Sarah smiled. You would have been saved, but you would not have been yourself. And we would never have discovered that air can learn to live. They watched as a young researcher from a species that breathed liquid methane worked side by side with a being made of pure plasma. The living atmosphere around them adjusted constantly, creating perfect conditions for both forms of life. Your people have a saying, Zixara said. Life finds a way. But I think it is more than that. Life finds the best way when we learn to cooperate with it instead of fighting against it. Outside the laboratory windows, ships from across the galaxy arrived daily. They brought new challenges, new problems that the most advanced technologies could not solve. But they also brought hope that biological cooperation could succeed where perfect control had failed. The air around Zixara pulsed gently with the rhythm of billions of tiny organisms working together to sustain life. What had begun as a desperate attempt to save one person had become the foundation for a new understanding of how different species could coexist. The galaxy's most primitive species had taught its most advanced civilizations the most important lesson of all. Sometimes, the best technology is life itself. As Sarah and Zixara returned to their research, the living atmosphere of the laboratory continued its quiet work, breathing for dozens of different species and proving that cooperation was stronger than control. The air had learned to live, and in learning to live, it had taught the galaxy how to truly thrive together.